Millions in Syria and Iraq are facing water shortages as the region's longest river, the Euphrates, dries up.
The mighty Euphrates River used to near Khaled al-Hamis's farm. But now the river is only visible from a distance.
The river Euphrates is drying up. Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 tells us, "Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared." Is this a fulfillment of Bible prophecy right before our eyes? That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. But before I do that, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and click the bell if you're new so you get notified about my future uploads. An online post entitled "Euphrates River is Drying Up" by ANFEnglish.com states, "Images captured on the banks of the Euphrates reveal that a large part of the Euphrates River has dried up. These areas, which were once a source of life for the region, have now become arid lands." This is Syria's worst water crisis in years. Online images show the drastic extent to which the Euphrates has dried up. The water level is at a historic low, and this disaster has affected the lives of 12 million people in Syria and Iraq who depend on the Euphrates for drinking water to irrigate their crops and for electricity through hydroelectric plants. Now, the reason for the Euphrates drying up is not what you may think. For example, it's not the result of climate change or something like that, even though climate change is exacerbating the problem. Kurdish forces in Syria blame Turkey for deliberately limiting the amount of water they are releasing through their dam into the Euphrates. Turkey is in control of about 90% of the water that flows into the Euphrates. Turkey and Syria are opposed to each other, and it is believed that Turkey has weaponized its water by intentionally decreasing the flow of water into the Euphrates in order to cripple Syria's economy. However, Turkey denies this. All things considered, is this a fulfillment of Revelation chapter 16 verse 12, which talks about the drying up of the Euphrates? No, and I'm going to give some Bible-based answers as to why not. First of all, the timing is wrong. The prophecy about the Euphrates drying up in Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 is part of the 7 last plagues. To be more specific, it's the 6th plague. The 7 last plagues are described as bowls of God's wrath, which are poured out onto the impenitent before the second coming of Jesus, and they don't happen until after the mark of the beast is enforced. For example, in speaking about the first plague, Revelation chapter 16 verses 1 through 2 says, "Then I heard a loud voice from the temple, saying to the 7 angels, 'Go and pour out the bowls of the wrath of God on the earth.' So the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth. And a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image." Notice, the first plague is poured out on those who receive the mark of the beast and worship his image. The mark of the beast is over worship. Revelation chapter 13 verses 11 through 12 and 15 through 16 says, "Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." There will come a time in the near future when a global attempt will be made to cause people to worship falsely. Deceived by Satan and his agents, The governing bodies of the world will attempt to force people to worship the beast and his image. This is idolatry. It's a violation of the second commandment. Those who refuse to worship the beast and his image will be restricted from buying and selling, and a death decree will be issued against them, while those who submit to the beast and his image will receive the mark of the beast. Obviously, we are not there yet. Currently, there is no global mandate to force people to worship falsely and restrict them from buying and selling if they don't. This is still future. So since the mark of the beast hasn't been enforced yet, and the 7 last plagues aren't poured out until after the mark of the beast is enforced, and the Euphrates River drying up is part of the 6th plague, what's happening now with the Euphrates can't be a fulfillment of Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 because the timing is wrong. What's more, the book of Revelation is highly symbolic. So when it talks about the Euphrates drying up, it's not talking about the literal river of the Euphrates. It's talking about the global support of the spiritual power of Babylon coming to an end to make way for the kings of the east. In prophecy, water represents people. Revelation chapter 17 verse 15 tells us, "The waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues." So Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 is not talking about the literal river Euphrates. On the contrary, the Euphrates here is used as a symbol for the global support of a false system of religion called Babylon the Great. Now, who are the kings of the east, you may be asking? I'm going to be explaining that later in this video, so keep watching. But before I do that, if you want to understand the prophecy about the Euphrates drying up, it's important to recognize that this is a reference to an Old Testament story about the fall of literal Babylon. In the book of Daniel, chapter 5, Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, lost his kingdom for committing sacrilege against God. Belshazzar held a feast where he used holy utensils which were taken from the Jewish temple to drink fermented wine and praise pagan idols. And as a result, his kingdom was taken from him. Part of the judgment pronounced against Belshazzar in Daniel chapter 5 verse 27 states, "You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians." History tells us that on that fateful night, Babylon was conquered by Cyrus the Great. An online post entitled "Babylon" by worldhistory.org states, "In 539 BCE, the empire fell to the Persians under Cyrus the Great at the Battle of Opis. Babylon's walls were impregnable, and so the Persians cleverly devised a plan whereby they diverted the course of the Euphrates River so that it fell to a manageable depth. While the residents of the city were distracted by one of their great religious feast days, the Persian army waded the river and marched under the walls of Babylon unnoticed. Cyrus and his army diverted the water from the Euphrates, causing it to dry up to a degree so they can overthrow Babylon." Do you see a parallel between this story and the prophecy of the Euphrates drying up in Revelation? They are related. As a matter of fact, the book of Revelation draws on a lot of Old Testament stories. One online post I read claimed that there are over 500 references to the Old Testament in the book of Revelation. Therefore, Old Testament stories help us understand end-time truths. Consequently, the parallel to the kings of the east from the prophecy about the Euphrates drying up in Revelation would be Cyrus and his army from the literal fall of Babylon. So if we could understand who Cyrus spiritually represents, we can identify who the kings of the east are in Revelation chapter 16 verse 12. Speaking of Cyrus, Isaiah chapter 45 verses 1 through 2 states, "Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him and loose the armor of kings, to open before him the double doors, so that the gates will not be shut. I will go before you and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of bronze and cut the bars of iron." Here the Lord calls Cyrus his anointed and says that he would go before him and make the crooked places straight. Sound familiar? The word anointed means Messiah. As a matter of fact, it's literally translated from the Hebrew word for Messiah. And speaking about John the Baptist, who is baptizing people and preparing the way for Jesus' first coming, Luke chapter 3 verses 4 through 6 says, "The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight. Every valley shall be filled, and every mountain and hill brought low. The crooked places shall be made straight, and the rough ways smooth, and all flesh shall see the salvation of God." It says the crooked places shall be made straight at the arrival of Jesus. And the Lord told Cyrus he would go before him and make the crooked places straight as well. That's no coincidence. Cyrus represents Jesus. Therefore, the kings of the east in Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 is Jesus and his army of angels who will come to this world after spiritual Babylon loses its global support. For confirmation, the Bible speaks of Jesus coming from the east at his second coming in Matthew chapter 24 verse 27, stating, "For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be." I touched on a lot of subjects in this video from the book of Revelation, like the 7 last plagues, Babylon the Great, the mark of the beast, and the second coming of Jesus. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow me to go into detail about all of these topics. However, if you would like to learn more about these subjects and get a thorough understanding of the book of Revelation, I highly recommend getting this book, Revelation verse by verse. I actually used this book as part of my research for this video, and it was very helpful. If you'd like to get a copy for yourself, I'll include a link to it in the video description. What's happening with the river Euphrates right now is not a fulfillment of end-time prophecy. The drying up of the Euphrates in Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 is part of the 6th plague, which takes place after the mark of the beast is enforced, which is still future. Not to mention, Revelation is a symbolic book, so the river Euphrates is not meant to be taken literally. Rather, it represents global support for Babylon the Great, which will fail before the second coming of Jesus. Now, even though what's happening with the river Euphrates right now is not a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, many other things that are happening in this world are, like the rise of false Christs, natural disasters, rising crime rates, and more. Learn more about this by clicking on the screen to watch my video entitled 20 Signs We Are Living in the End Times. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it to help spread God's word. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.